Hello everyone, Dave here again. Welcome to the first installment of my Through the Ages series on the Thief slash Rogue or Rouge class. Now, in the past, I've been doing some of these Through the Ages videos, and I had taken things like the Paladin class, and I forget what the other one was that I had also done, but I ended up making each edition of like D&D and Pathfinder their own separate video, and I don't think I'm going to do that going forward. It depends on how complex the class is, perhaps, but the Thief is not an overly involved class throughout the history of the D&D and even going into Pathfinder 1st and 2nd edition. So I've decided to break it into 3 parts. I think should cover everything quite well. The first installment here is going to be the old school Thief class, where the Thief was called the Thief. The second video will be the 3rd edition era of the Rogue class, which will take a look at the 3.0, 3.5, and Pathfinder 1st edition Rogue class. And then the final one will be sort of the more modern eras, where we'll take a look at the 4th edition, the 2024 version of the 5th edition Rogue, and the Pathfinder Remastered Rogue. So that should give us a pretty wide net when it comes to like the various editions, without getting a little too nitpicky or finicky with it. So anyway, let's just go ahead and start. And if you want me to go back to each edition gets its own separate video format, let me know that in the comments below. But I think for this one, especially with the Rogue class, I think this is the way that I kind of want to tackle this. So again, today we've got the Rule Cyclopedia, which represents sort of the finalized version of the Rogue class throughout the D&D basic rule set, as the Rule Cyclopedia combines the BECMI books, which the BECMI version of D&D included sort of a revised version of the Moldvay Cook version of D&D Basic Expert, which in itself was an updated version of the Eric Holmes basic rules. So we're getting sort of like the finalized, most complete version of the Rogue class in the Rule Cyclopedia, as well as the 1st edition AD&D Player's Handbook and the 2nd edition AD&D Player's Handbook. When it comes to the Rogue class, the main things that I kind of want to look at are the main like thief abilities that they got in these early versions of the D&D game, and sort of how they changed or how they evolved, as well as the backstab ability, and they have another ability at a higher level as well that we'll sort of take a look at here. So we got the Rule Cyclopedia, and the Rule Cyclopedia, I think this released in 1991 in the I guess the U.S., Canada. I don't know exactly when the rest of the world would have gotten it, but yeah, 1991 for the Rule Cyclopedia. And like I said, this is a compilation of not the BECMI rules, but the BECM, with the Basic, Expert, Companion, and Master rules. And the Immortal rules got their own re-release in the form of a box set, which I'm not obviously interested in anyway, but let alone for the purpose of this video. So when it came to basic D&D, if you weren't aware, like if you've never played this version of the game, it is quite a bit different than even some of like the older versions of the D&D game, like 1st and 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And the name Advanced Dungeons & Dragons obviously implies that there's a basic D&D, and that's what this is. In this version of the game, the classes that we think of when it comes to like the thief, the magic user, the cleric, and the fighter, they were all the human classes. And if you wanted to be an elf, dwarf, or a halfling, then you would take them as like the dwarf, elf, and halfling class. Now, in basic D&D, the elf, halfling, and dwarf kind of took after the fighter, which is sort of interesting because when we do get into like the AD&D games, when you look at like level restrictions, the class that every race could basically take unlimited like number of level progressions with was the Rogue class. So it's interesting that they kind of defaulted, the demi-human races defaulted to a fighter style character in the Rule Cyclopedia, whereas in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rule set, like the thief was the easiest class to get like the most levels and sort of thing. So let's go ahead and get to the class itself. Alright, so in the Rule Cyclopedia, the Thief class starts on page 21. So their prime requisite is dexterity. What that means is, in this version of the game, you had to have certain stats to be certain things, like to be an elf or dwarf. For example, you needed to have certain ability scores at a certain point, right? So, like for the dwarf, they had to have a strength and a constitution of 9 or better, because the prime requisite had to be a score of 9 or better. I think the elf needed to have, where are we here, strength and intelligence of 9. So still not the hardest things to qualify for. And then the halfling, I think, is, what is it? The halfling is strength and dexterity. So again, they all required strength because they took after the fighter. So the thief required at least a 9 in their dexterity score. If they had a 13 or 15, like 13, 14, or 15 in their dexterity, they received a 5% experience point bonus. And if they had a 16, 17, or 18 for their dexterity score, then they ended up receiving a 10% experience bonus. So if they got 100 points of experience for something, they would end up actually getting 110. So they get a little bit of bonus for having high scores in your prime requisite abilities. Now, the hit die for the thief in basic D&D is different from every other version of the game in that they were rolling D4s. And yes, I did say rolling because even at first level in old school D&D, you rolled for hit points. And yes, it was very possible to have 1 hit point. And so the thief is a human who specializes in stealth, lockpicking, trap removing, and other such activities. And we'll take a look at the actual abilities that they end up getting here. So we've got the handy-dandy table here. And I'm still kind of getting over this like cold or sickness that I've had for the last week. All the symptoms are gone except for like the cough, which lasts for like 2-3 weeks after I get sick anyway. But we got the Thief Special Abilities table here. So this was a percentile-based system where it would sort of determine your chance of succeeding at various activities. In this version of the game, these are your stats. These are your percentages, and they change automatically as you progress through leveling. So level 1 Thief has only a 15% chance to open locks, only a 10% chance to find and remove traps, a 20% chance to move silently, a 10% chance to hide in shadows, a 20% chance to pickpocket, and a 30% chance to hear noise. That second level, they go up to 20% and 15% for open locks and find traps. Remove traps, also 15%. 25% for move silently, 15%. So it sort of goes up in increments. You can get above 100%, but there's always going to be like certain modifiers that will apply, that will give penalties that I think... I want to say that you can always fail, but that might be part of the AD&D system. But the main thing is that you had these thief abilities, and they are fixed. So anytime you make a level 1 thief, those are your abilities there. And there's no modifications to it. You just get what the chart tells you. Then you also get the backstabbing ability. So if the thief can sneak up on a victim completely unnoticed, the thief may backstab. If he's using a one-handed melee weapon, he may strike particularly vulnerable points of the target's body. And although it's called backstabbing, you don't actually have to use a piercing weapon. You can use like a bludgeoning weapon, like club them on the back of the head. If you're able to sneak up on your opponent while backstabbing, the thief gets a +4 bonus to the attack roll. And if they hit, you roll your weapon die and you multiply that by 2 before adding any other bonuses for like high strength and stuff like that to it. So if you sneak up on your opponent, you get your attack roll, you get an extra +4 bonus. Let's just say you're most likely using a weapon that's going to deal a d6. So you roll a d6, let's just say you roll a 4. That doubles to 8, and then you get to add like extra +1 or 2 if you have a good strength. Now, the backstab ability does require you to sneak up on somebody who's unaware. So if they are aware that you're present, if somebody shouts a warning, for example, then the backstab doesn't really go off. It was a very difficult ability to actually, be able to use reliably in combat. And typically it was the sort of thing that you maybe were lucky to get once in a battle, and not necessarily once against every enemy in the fight, but just to be able to get it off once. You also, like, outside of combat, you would make your stealth checks, stuff like that. It doesn't say how to deal with it in in combat, like if you roll the sneaking or not. I would assume that you would either have to have rolled that at the beginning of, like, before initiative was rolled, and to be hidden when initiative starts, or otherwise, like, maybe you get to do it on a surprise round or something like that. But it was a very difficult ability to pull off, and truthfully, doubling the dice damage sounds great, but you're doubling, like, the lowest dice in the game. Like, the thief weapon proficiencies that they have access to, they're either doing like D3s, D4s, or D6s. I don't think there's even a single thief weapon in this early version of the game that does a D8 that they have access to. So it's just one of those things where it sounds great, but it's not the best thing. The +4 bonus to hit is honestly a much more significant ability when it comes to the backstabbing than the ability to, like, double the dice damage. It helps. But if you can roll a 1 on the die and do 2 points instead, type of thing, right? So it can be it can be good, or it can be really underwhelming. But that +4 bonus to hit is definitely a good one there. And then the thief also has the ability to read languages. So when they reach 4th level, they have an 80% chance to read any normal written or writing or language. Sorry. Including simple codes, dead languages, treasure maps, and so on, but not magical writings. If he tries but fails to read a piece of writing, he must gain at least 1 experience level before going to trying it again. So that was another sort of older mechanic where you could try something, but if you failed, you needed to get a level before you could try it again. It's to represent, like, more studying, more, like, maybe finding more clues to help you decipher. But in reality, it's just like you fight more things and you find more gold, and suddenly that makes you smarter to the point where you can read the ability, sort of thing. But it's just one of those, like, quirks of, like, the older game. It's the way that it's intended to be versus the way that it actually kind of gets presented in most games. And then at 10th level, they have the ability to cast a scroll or cast spells from a magic user scroll. However, there is always a 10% chance that the spell will backfire, creating an unexpected result because the thief's imperfect understanding of magical writings. So they do have the ability to use scrolls, and the 10% chance isn't that bad. So it's basically, what is it? A 1 in 10 chance that if you cast 10 scrolls or 10 spells off of 10 scrolls, that one of them might mess up. But 10% chance is not too bad. It's something that would definitely make using those scrolls a lot more worthwhile. The other thing about the Thief class in these earlier versions of the D&D game that is worth noting is that in the older D&D pre-3rd edition era, each of the different classes progressed at a different rate of experience points. And the Thief was one of the lowest, if not the lowest, class in terms of, like, how much experience points they needed to progress through their leveling. So the downside of the Thief is that you're limited into, like, your leather armor or studded leather armor, I think, at best in this version of the game. You have access to a handful of weapons that are okay, but they're never going to compete with, like, a fighter wielding, a long sword, or like a bastard sword or a two-handed sword. You're never going to be able to compete with that. But you do gain some things that make, playing this class worthwhile. Again, you progress through levels quicker. You have less hit points, but you do tend to gain levels faster than everybody else, so you should be kind of on par with some of the tougher characters in the party. And in the basic version of the game, you do have that 10% chance, or you do have the chance to use scrolls with only a 10% chance of failure. So overall, not a bad version of the class. I think the D4 hit dice is the only thing that kind of holds this one back. I don't know why they decided to go with just the D4, like to make the thief as vulnerable or as, like, easy to take down as a wizard. Like, I think that the thief deserves a little bit more than that. So they do have, like, D6s in both the AD&D version, I guess, as a spoiler for that. But yeah, so the D4 is the only thing that kind of bothers me. Of course, you do have your thief abilities, which, man, like, they start so low that, you have to be a pretty decent level. Like, to have a 50% chance to open a lock, you need to be 8th level. Right? Like, you reach your named level at, level 10? So you're only 2 levels away from your named level. where you only gain like fixed hit points, and you stop adding like bonuses for con and all these other things, to have a 50% chance to open a lock. It's kind of the thief abilities always felt like you always wanted to celebrate when they actually worked, because it didn't seem to happen that often. And again, like 10% chance to hide in shadows, 20% chance to move silently at level 1, 10% chance to find and remove traps, right? You're just not going to get those off very often. I do think, though, if I recall correctly, the thief does get experience points for each successful use of their thief abilities. So at lower levels, you're not going to be getting that a lot, but if you do manage to get that, it does help. Again, I might be confusing that with later versions of the D&D game, though, so that's totally something I should point out. But yeah, anyway, a pretty decent class. Again, this was the human version. The closest thing to the thief from the demi-humans was the halfling, although the halfling is still basically a fighter. However, the halfling does have the ability to hide in natural surroundings where they have sort of some form of concealment. They have, I think it was an 80% chance to be able to hide. And if they are, where is it here? No, 90% chance. They had a 90% chance to remain unseen if they are in like the woods or underbrush. And if they're in a building or some sort of like interior location, if they're able to find some shadows to hide in, then they still have a 33% chance of being able to hide. So that's the kind of the closest thing that the halflings got to like the halfling thief combination in the basic version of the D&D game. So there we go. That was the Rule Cyclopedia. We'll set you off to the side. And now let's take a look at the first edition AD&D Player's Handbook. So let's get into it here. Find the thief class. So cleric, I think magic user comes after, or comes before the thief. So there's the magic user. Okay. So the thief starts at the very bottom of page 26. So when I say like the organization of the first edition D&D was kind of like frustrating to deal with, like it would have been nice if each class started at the top of a page, for example, as opposed to at the very bottom of a page there. But it is what it is, I guess. So we have the thief class here. So they do require, once again, a 9 dexterity in order to become a thief. It also says that a high intelligence is also desirable, and if a thief has more than 15 in their dexterity, they gain a 10% bonus. So no 5% bonus in this version of the game. So when it comes to the thieves as well, they do have their thief abilities, which we see here on this handy-dandy table. Right, so, and the percentage chances are a little bit better, not the best, but, like open locks, for example, is 25% as opposed to, what was it, like 15%, so they do have some better bonuses, and the race of the thief can also modify things that they get for their starting abilities. So again, as you level, you just take the new updated table entries. So when you go from first to second level, your pickpockets goes from 30 to 35. However, if you are an elf, your pickpockets start at 35 and go up to 40% because you add plus 5% to the pickpockets ability. So again, that's kind of cool to see. So your race will factor into that, but there's more that factor into the thief abilities as well in here. So, if we go back to our attributes, wisdom, intelligence, go back one more. So there's strength, intelligence, wisdom, it's dex after that, isn't it? Yeah, there's a dexterity one. So, with the dexterity, again, you actually have some modifications to the thief abilities. So, depending on what your abilities are, so, for example, if you just meet the 9 prerequisite for the thief class, you get minus 15% on that pickpocket chance. If you have a 12 through 15 to 16, you don't really get much in the way of adjustments, but once you get into like 16, 17, or 18, your dexterity will modify things as well, but that's also not quite it. So we have to go now to the equipment section. So there's armor. Because I think your armor also modifies things as well. Of course, now that I'm trying to find that, I probably won't be able to. But I think there were some modifications for the armor as well. But again, maybe I'm thinking of I might be thinking of a different edition of the game. But in this version of the game, at the very least, your race and your dexterity can modify those starting thief abilities. So that is already better than what we had before. So you do get a little bit higher percentages to start with for most of the thief abilities there, and your demi-human race can affect those those percentages even further, and having a good dex can also increase that. So it's really kind of good to see there. Then the thief also has, let's see here, so we're on to the assassin. So I think we have to go back here a little bit. So the thief also once again has the backstabbing ability. So similar to before, it has to be a blow from behind, be it with a club, dagger, or sword. The damage done per hit is twice the normal value of the weapon used per 4 levels of experience. So, for example, a thief of levels 1 through 4 is double. A thief of levels 5 through 8 triples the die. And 9 through 12, you quadruple it, and you quintuple it from 13 to 16. Note that striking by surprise from behind also increases the hit probability by +4. Again, it doesn't quite go into how difficult it is to pull that off in a fight, but I feel like it's pretty similar to other versions of the game where you have to be hidden at the start of the fight, so maybe invisible, or you have successfully, succeeded on your stealth rolls earlier before initiative was rolled, and you make your way from there. Okay, didn't mean to bump the camera there, but that's alright. And then finally, at 10th level, the Master Thief has the ability to use scrolls of all sorts, excluding those of clerical but not druidic magic. So basically, magic user or druid spells. However, the fact that thieves do not fully comprehend magic means there is a 25% chance that the writings will be misunderstood. So a little bit of a trade-off with the level 1 thief in this version of the game. Their backstab does eventually get better, like getting the triple or quadruple or like the 5 times multiplier. Although going from getting to 9th level took a lot of experience, even for like the thief class. In the D&D game, so you need 145,000 experience, which is 50,000 experience more than you needed for the level before. But it's definitely better that the backstab actually does improve, because ×2 can be really crappy when you roll like a 1 or a 2 on the die, especially again since you're usually doing D4s or D6s. But to do a D6 and roll like a 4 or 5 and be able to multiply that by 4 or 5 as well, that suddenly makes that backstab a lot more impactful. Again, it's more difficult to achieve because you do have to approach them to the point where they're unaware of it. But the backstab eventually gets to be the best part of the ability. The +4 to hit's always good, but the fact that we get up to like ×5 eventually does that make that a lot more useful. I mean, on a D6, that's a chance to do 30 points of damage. So, pretty decent. And then the scrolls, for example, they are a bit held back by the fact that you now have a 25% chance of failure. So that does change. That does kind of change the reliability of that ability quite a bit. A 1 in 10 chance is, not too bad. But now you're getting to like a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to screw up the scroll. That makes it a lot more something that you want to be a bit more careful of. But still pretty cool to see nonetheless. And with the thief abilities again, it is nice to see that they are starting at higher numbers and they are also being like the race of the thief class or the character, as well as their dexterity is also being factored in. So lower dexterities, like dexterities on the lower end, hamper your abilities, and higher dexterities improve your abilities. But just sort of like the natural agility of some of the demi-human races can also make like some of these abilities more or less practical for them to use. Like a half orc trying to pickpocket is not as good as, say, a half elf or even a halfling, but still, it's still cool to see that they find that they have the sort of modifications. But you are still, I believe, you're still getting the exact, like when you level up, you just take the new values on the tables there. So that was the first edition AD&D version of the Thief class. Let's take a look now at the final version to have Thief as the class's main name here as we go into the second edition version of the game. And this is the black covered ones, which had just some horrendous artwork for the character classes. That was not too bad. That was not too bad either, actually. I do like the priest there, the druid's not great. And here we have the rogue. Again, not a great piece of artwork. But let's go ahead and take a look here. So, similar to the first edition one, the rogue I think has a D6 for hit dice in first edition AD&D. So let's just quickly get back into that and just confirm that, because I don't want to say it and then be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's the case. And then the thief. Yeah, they use 6-sided dice for their hit points. So they're meant by cunning stealth thieves have a D6 for their hit dice. They are, however, able to wear light leather armor. Okay. So we have the rogue class here. Again, the experience table. Again, the organization in some of the early games is weird because the rogue experience table is on the description of the druid. And the actual, like, thief abilities start on the next page. So you have their experience point table on the page before the class description even begins. I don't know what we're doing here. But anyway, so here we can see some differences already, but let's start with some of the similarities. They do have the D6 for the hit dice. They still require a minimum of a 9 dexterity to be a thief class. And if you have a 16 or more in that dexterity attribute, you do get a plus 10 experience point bonus. But here's where things get really interesting. And I was wrong. I don't think there was any armor adjustments for the Thief's Backstab in the player's handbook anyway. I know there is the second edition one. But you see, you only start with these base scores for your thieving abilities. Now that sounds pretty bad at first, right? Because like your pickpockets is a base value of 15%, 10% open locks. We're kind of back to some of those like crappy numbers. 5% chance to hide in shadows. But it is modified by a few different things here. For starters, we do have our racial adjustments once again. So if you're a dwarf, elf, gnome, half-elf, or halfling, you do get adjustments to the different thieving abilities. So an elf pickpocket starts at a base of 20 as opposed to 15. And your dex can also, once again, modify these things. So if you had like a 17 dex, for example, if you're an elf with a 17 dex, your base score starts at 15, 20, and then 25 for that. But you also get 60 percentage points that you can distribute amongst the abilities. So there's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you have 60 points that you can distribute. No more than 30 points can go into a single ability. But you're able to fully customize your thieving abilities now. So if you want it to be somebody who focuses on finding and remove traps, detecting noise, being able to read languages, stuff like that, like you can do that. Or if you wanted to focus on like picking pockets and opening locks, hiding, like the stealth things, then you can do that as well. And then every time you gain a level with the character, you get another 30 points that you can distribute, with no more than 15 points going into a particular ability. So you do have those customization options there. And if we do go, oh, look at the bard, by the way. Oof, horrendous. But if we do go into our equipment here, like weapons and armor, Oh. Maybe it's on this page here. Oh, here it is. There's the armor adjustment. So depending on the armor that you're wearing, you can also get other bonuses. So if you're not wearing any armor, your pickpockets also gets a +5 boost, percentage boost. If you're wearing elven chain, you get negative 20%, and if you're wearing padded or stud leather, you get negative 30%. So those numbers do kind of suck, but you're probably going to be starting with like leather or like studded leather, so you're probably going to be starting with like none of these bonuses. But there are, like, if you're wearing no armor, you do get some benefits, and then by the time you get these like higher penalty armors, you're likely, at a high enough level where you've already put quite a few points into things. You can put points in to sort of offset those penalties as well. We get to the backstab ability. It works similar to the previous edition of the game. So thieves are weak in toe-to-toe hacking matches, but they are masters of the knife in the back when attacking somebody by surprise. So they actually do mention the word surprise in this. And from behind, they get a +4 bonus to hit, and then their multiplier again works similarly to the previous edition. So at level 1 through 4, they're doing double damage. 5 through 8, they're doing 3 times. 9 through 12, they're doing 4 times. And levels 13 plus, they're doing 5 times their weapon die. So yeah, they do have to be attacking by surprise, which means they have to be either unobserved or stealthy or invisible, or they would have had to have been hidden at the start of combat, maybe during a surprise round. So again, it's a little bit more difficult to pull off. You do have to attack from behind, and in these earlier versions of the D&D game, attacking from certain facings did matter. For example, if you're attacking an opponent with a shield, most shields could only block the forward arc, so the area directly in front of the character, although bigger shields could also defend against the flanks. But there was usually no other bonus to their armor class for being attacked from behind. So again, it's just kind of like, they do kind of give you the, well, it doesn't necessarily go into like the difficulty of it. It does say that you have to be attacking from surprise. So again, they can't be able to see you or detect you or know that you're there in any way, shape, or form. Also, again, at 10th level, the thief gains a limited ability to use magical and pre-scroll. So I guess they finally just fully caved. A thief's understanding of magical writings is far from complete. The thief has a 25% chance to read the scroll incorrectly and reverse the spell's effect. So that is actually important because there are spells in this game that are reversible. So there's cure wounds and cause wounds or inflict wounds. I forget what terminology they use in 2nd edition. That one is the reverse of the other. Stone to flesh or flesh to stone. One is the reverse of the other. So there are reversible spells, and it is worth noting again that the terminology is quite important there. So yeah, and again, like the thing that all thief classes have, especially in these early days, they all have like the thieves' cant, which is sort of their own like unique language that can't be understood by individuals that aren't a thief or part of their thieves guild. But the main thing I wanted to focus on was the evolution of their thieving abilities, going from just a set static table in the original or in the D&D basic rules to a set table but modified by your dex and your race in the 1st edition one, to a much more customizable version of your thief abilities in the 2nd edition AD&D Player's Handbook, which is also again modified by armor, by your race, and by your dexterity. So it's kind of cool to see the way that those have evolved. We also have the evolution of the backstab ability, going from simply doubling the die off of attacking from behind and by surprise in the Rules Cyclopedia, to starting to gain like increased multipliers in 1st and 2nd edition, with 2nd edition using the term surprise when it comes to like the target being attacked, they have to be surprised by the attack. So that sort of gives you like the rules that you need in order to like actually run the sneak attack. It means that again, unless you have the ability to repeatedly become invisible, like with the ring of invisibility or potions of invisibility, then you're probably only going to be getting your sneak attack off once, maybe twice in a game. I actually ran a 1st edition AD&D game for a little while there, and I was very generous with how I allowed the thief to use their backstab. and we were all level 1 characters, or they were all level 1 characters. And Alex said I was very generous about how they were able to like actually get to use that ability, because it's one of their major ones. And it didn't find it to be game breaking at all, because like his ×2 was great and everything, but very rarely was he doing more damage than just the fighter swinging their weapon. So, but yeah, there we go. So the thief ability through the ages, the early versions of D&D, the old school editions of D&D. Let me know what you guys thought of the video. What version of the rogue did you play? Like, did you play a Rule Cyclopedia rogue with the D4 hit dice, or were you AD&D thieves with the D6 and the sneak attack that did improve as you went up in levels? Do you prefer the thief abilities to be just a set table, and that's that? A set table modified by race and dexterity, or a set of starting points that are modified by the armor choice that you make, your race, and your dexterity, and then you get to customize it from there. I think my favorite version of the thief class abilities are in the 2nd edition Player's Handbook. There, the ability to customize your thieving abilities to be the percentages, they're closer to percentages that you want to be. The fact that you can level up the ones that you intend to use, while not necessarily having to worry about the ones that you don't really use, I think is a big bonus here. And overall, I just think that the sneak attack getting better and better as the thief improves through leveling definitely is a benefit for the AD&D version. So the Rule Cyclopedia, it's a cool class, but I don't think it's one that I would be running to play. If you do like the stats in order and your best stat is dexterity, then you're probably going to play a thief by default. But again, like the faster level progression is also great. They had that again in the AD&D ones. They progressed a little bit slower than the thief in the Zero or the Rule Cyclopedia, but only marginally so. But they were still the fastest progressing class in the game. So you get the trade-off of being weaker in terms of your combat abilities, in terms of your armor and weapon proficiencies, in terms of your hit points, by the fact that you gain levels faster. So anyway, that was my first look at the thief. And in the next video in this series, we'll be taking a look at the 3rd edition era rogue class. So we'll be taking a look at the 3.0, 3.5, and the Pathfinder 1st edition versions of the rogue class, where they're pretty drastically changed in ways that make them hardly recognizable to the earlier versions that are shown in this video. Anyway, thank you all so much for your time. I truly appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one, and until then, take care.